Hello, everybody, and welcome to lesson 10 of Class Is Logic Logical? Now, because we're moving into logic and we're leaving creativity, I have my little book here with notes here just to make things logical and to make sure that there's not too much creativity where you don't make sense of anything. So I provide enough logic to keep you sane. So let's go ahead and get into it. One of the first things I want to answer for you guys is, well, what is logic? Logic is the study of rules and tests for sound reasoning. Is logic the same as common sense? Well, let's think about that, right? We just had a lesson in creativity, but logic is supposed to make sense out of the creativity. However, without creativity, would you ever be able to test logic? Probably not. So I would say that it is slightly different because common sense would dictate you do one thing based upon morals, values, and ethics, whereas logic is just like, well, 2 plus 2, and that's the thing that I'm supposed to do, so I'm gonna just do it. Versus common sense, you put some more critical thinking and thought behind it. So this might not be a long video. However, it is the first lesson in logic as we move forward through the acronym class. So another thing, why is logic important? Well, logic is important because, well, it helps us understand the world and helps us relate to it and make sense of it with all the creativity, art, stories, science, so on and so forth that might reside within the world, right? So when you're thinking of logic, it's logical to take care of plants, especially if they're feeding you. It's logical to take care and maintain your household if it's sheltering you and keeping you safe and warm. It's logical to maintain your vehicle if it's getting you to work or that's your mode of work, transportation, and so much more. So yes, logic is important. However, it's not as more important than creativity. Now, I'm not saying that creativity is the most important, but it's a way that things all come together. And that's the thing. We have to baby step this because, well, let's just face it. If we try to put everything together from class, people may get lost in the sauce and only a handful of people might make it to the end with proper understanding, of creativity, logic, art, science, spirituality, and so much more, especially when we get to other cultures and we talk about emotion, which also feeds into both the last two, so on and so forth. I should say the last three if you talk about artwork, so on and so forth, because it gives you an emotion. Now, why does logic fail sometimes? Logic fails sometimes simply because, well, new things get created that test that logic and may prove it to be either false, broken, or needs improvement. What do I mean? Well, if we would have stuck with the same pieces of technology that we started off with without improving it, simply based on the logic of, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it or improve it, well, then we would not make it very far. And this is where we would have a very, very slow pace. Thankfully, we have innovators and early adopters, so on and so forth, that are pushing the envelope because, as they say, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Now, that's just a metaphor, but last time I checked, you need a diamond tip drill in order to cut through many hard surfaces. The only way something gets stronger is if you push back on it and then pulse at the same time or take turns doing so. Think about working out, right? When you're bench pressing, you're pushing against, but the gravity and the weight is pushing back against you. That's the way you get stronger. So as iron sharpens iron, as one man sharpens another, you can also sharpen yourself simply by getting into the gym and pushing back against gravity and everything else to go ahead and strengthen your body so that it could go ahead and propel you through and move you to the future. So that's a couple things that I wanted to touch on there. So if you do what has always been done, you will always get what you've always got. Now, I'm pretty sure this was from Les Brown, and I kind of maybe butchered the quote, but I definitely wanted to put it in there because of logic, right? And the reason why is because it's very logical to say that because, well, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. The only way to get a different result is to do something slightly different or just different in general. It doesn't even have to be that big. As Tony Robbins says, a small millimeter change can change so much in your life. A slight shift can put us on a different orbit or on a different plane or whatever, depending on where you are geographically or within the universe. So you have to think that way, right? Yes, it's logical, but it takes a little bit of creativity to make that shift to see that if you do, maybe things will just be a little bit better. Now, when it comes to logic, this is where a lot of engineers, physicists, scientists, so on and so forth fall into. And they fall into this trap because, yes, they have all the things that came with creativity, but logic says if you do this and you follow these recipes, it will work out like this every single time. And that's very logical and it's very safe. And according to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is one of those things right there with survival. So right after safety, I'm pretty sure is love and compassion and things like that. But you need to feel safe, not only in your own environment, but with whom the people that you reside. So when I think of logistics and I think of logic, I think, well, what does logistics have to do with logic? Well, one, you can't spell logistics without logic, so you have that. Two, it's very recipe oriented. You know, everybody has a route, everybody has a plan, everybody has a recipe, everybody has a way of knowing how things move. And because you have a way of understanding how things move, you fall into this complacent safe zone so that yes, you can accurately move with speed and intensity, knowing with what's where and where you have to go and what to put next. However, when something interferes, creativity, whatever, then it changes the whole situation, and that's where logistics has an issue. Now, you have to be very intelligent to be in logistics because there's a lot of moving parts within logistics, whether you're in supply chain, whether you're in business, whether you're in trucking and shipping, so on and so forth, and so much more. Even when it comes to people movement, so on and so forth, when it comes to airlines, etc. So when you're talking about logistics, yes, you do have to be intelligent because, well, logistics is the way the world works, operates, and moves, not only supplies, but the demand for those supplies that is currently in the form of cash, gold, or whatever that is being exchanged or bartered for those supplies. I'm pretty sure some of you saw that when the ports closed down and logistics got interrupted, it affected the United States dramatically on one whole side, costing roughly, according to the news, $3 billion a day. Now, if you don't think that is a deficit, you should have seen what the companies that represent all those businesses, how they took a hit on the stock market, and then you could see the major costs across the board. Now, I can only imagine what's going to happen in the future, but I'm sure that everybody has been taken care of for right now. So, you know, when you're talking about logistics, remember you're dealing with also very analytical people. And if something doesn't make sense, then you're going to have to explain the creativity or that process to them in order for it to make sense and be logical in their own mind. So, why am I incorporating this into class? Well, a lot of people can talk about creativity and how wonderful it is, but when it comes to logic, you notice it's very boring. And just a little secret, although I may have had bad grades in math, so on and so forth, I did exceptionally well in physics, so on and so forth, because the numbers had meaning and purpose. Now, in mathematics, it was just more numbers adding to more numbers and shapes with sine, cosine, tangents, and all these other, so on and so forth symbols, but they meant nothing. On the moment you assigned something to those things and gave it meaning, then for some reason my brain just was able to figure it out. I remember I had an ex of mine. We were studying for the ASVAB, and we were getting to real difficult questions. She was in a lot of AP or advanced classes, so on and so forth, advanced placement classes down here in the South. And we were going over the math section because, well, she understood that I got bad math grades, so on and so forth. But the moment there was a dollar sign in front of it, or the moment that that value was attached to something that gave it a purpose or meaning, my brain was immediately able to figure it out. And she would look at me and say, "How did you do that?" And I would say, "I don't know." And she would get really frustrated because I would just come up with the answer and she would just look at me and say, "How did you know that?" And I wouldn't know how. It wouldn't be until later on that I just realized that my brain just does things differently when there's a purpose attached to something that seems meaningless. So, and this is something that not only works for me, but I've noticed it also works for others that are in search of meaning, so on and so forth, as Jordan Peterson would say, so on and so forth. And they need a purpose attached to something. Money's not valuable unless it's attached to a goal that you're wishing to achieve. So therefore, by which you're able to go ahead and then assign yourself, well, a salary. I want to make this amount so I could afford this, this, and this. I want to have a family, so I want to make this amount so I could afford this, this, and this. And when my wife goes on maternity leave, so on and so forth, or my partner goes on maternity leave, etc., or we take time for the baby, we have time, money, so on and so forth, etc., to do that. It's different goals that set the purpose and the tone and the pitch in which someone is able to go ahead and take action on the potential that they possibly have, so that they can go ahead and move forward, not only with their creativity and logic, but create some type of art or science with it, quoting the acronym. But you normally fall into one of those categories. I mean, think about it. You normally get a bachelor's in the arts or the sciences after understanding creativity and logic and how to apply those things. So, quick question. What's more valuable, money or gold? Right? Now, what's more valuable logically, right? Gold or money, right? Some people would say money, some people would say gold. It's just a different form of currency. Now, if I were to remove the L from gold, it would spell God, right? So what's more important? Money or God? Well, that depends if you even believe in God, so on and so forth. So this is where the value structure comes into place, as well as creativity and everything coming together with logic, so that you can tell yourself a story of what is valuable, what you hold dear, and, well, what is going to dictate your ethics and everything else moving forward in life, depending on if you want to grow old, if you were to separate the G and leave OLD from gold, grow old, which I think is life is, the gold, right? To live a long, healthy life, right? Because think about this. What if the meaning of life is to work together as the body cells do in order to survive and grow old, right? Yes, the body's cells do work together just like everything else in the universe. And, if you think about it, it all works in unison. And if there's something disrupting the logistics, right, of the movement of energy and flow, so on and so forth, then there's a disruption not only in your system, but in your body and the atmosphere and the universe and the computer, etc. So you have to understand the logistics of movement. And that's where logic would come into play, right? Because you need to have certain set patterns relatively set, just in case there's also any speed bumps. And that's where you get things like a standard operating procedure. Or if you ever study Tim Ferriss's fear setting, you can go ahead and do that and research that and look it up. And that's where you make 3 columns, similar to like a SOP, but in a different case. And in the first column, you write all the worst things that can happen. Now, I don't know why they didn't do this with FEMA, but that's a whole other thing. So write down in the first column all the bad things that can happen. In the second column, you want to write down all the ways you could prevent that and hopefully take action on those things. And then in the third column, you want to put every which way you can go ahead and recover and repair, just in case the preventative measures don't work from the bad things. This is not only putting forward thought and critical thinking into your process, but developing a safety plan and developing a plan in general that is logical for everyone to understand, just in case something happens. And what are the things that we have in place in order to prevent those things from happening, so that we don't have to think about that when we're coming up with a solution, because those things didn't work. So keep that to yourself as a grain of salt, so on and so forth, for the future. Some of you may have studied your Series 6 or Series 7. This is where you have minimal problems within a certain amount of times at bat, so on and so forth. So let's say you get like 3 issues every 1,000 assemblies, so on and so forth, when building an engine, so on and so forth, or whatever the case may be. Moving forward, does logic make sense when a different question is applied? Well, the answer to that is yes. This is why it is up to creative people to question it, because the logic might be broken. Now, what do I mean by this? When computers first came out, they were all very bland, right? It wasn't until Apple introducing color, introducing creativity to the logic, that it gave them a blue ocean strategy and gave people the ability to identify with certain PCs that were out in the market against its competitors. Instead of saying, I wanted the brand name, they can say, I wanted the color of the computer. Now, when that happened, a lot of other brands didn't pick up on that or didn't want to mimic it too much because it would cause possibly confusion. But when they say, oh, I want the blue computer, or I want the pink, or the green, or the red, or whatever computer, when they were able to say that, they were able to quickly identify it and tie it to Apple because they were the only one in the field at the time that introduced color to their PCs, so on and so forth, etc., giving them a more recognizable appearance to more demographics of people, opening up their market share, giving them a blue ocean strategy in a sense, right? So yes, the logic can be broken sometimes because let's face it, before that, all the computers or laptops or whatever, they were either black, gray, or beige, or whatever color they were. Taupe, I think, was one of the colors, but they all came and looked the same. It wasn't until later when creativity and people started to, the techies really started to mess with creativity and put lights and everything else and build rigs that were awesome, that you started to see the differentiation. And then you would start to see colors and everything else. Now you have Alienware, MSI, and all these other brands, etc. Now, what does this mean for logic? Well, it means that logic is not perfect and it will never be in some cases. Yes, in certain formulations, in certain formulas within mathematics and science, there's things that are concrete. However, we have all been proven wrong at times. Remember, at one point, Galileo was put in jail for literally saying things that they didn't want him to say, and then later on it was proven true. Da Vinci, he also suffered the same thing when it came to mechanical engineering, so on and so forth. And, let's just face it, if you're talking about the founding fathers, Freemasons, and all that, someone last time I checked was a carpenter, which is a civil engineer today, which means that they were an engineer, meaning they were extremely intelligent. So, what does that tell you? Do you think that this place was built by unintelligent people? Well, that you can go ahead and figure out for yourself, but I'm going to move forward. So, AI can now be used to challenge professionals in their fields, such as MDs, lawyers, police, and so much more. Now, these are all very logical fields because they go by what's known as the book, right? But what book? The legal book, the judicial system, whatever the case may be, but they have a certain set of parameters depending on their specialization and where they reside within their profession. So if you're in undercover cop, if you're with the FBI, DIA, CEA, or CIA, sorry, NSA, NASA, whatever the case may be, you all have a different designation and you are a cog in a wheel because remember, this is all about logistics. And well, in order for those people to be successful, they need to have proper logistics of, well, communication, how they require and obtain that information, that communication, how they decipher it, how they break it down, and when they know when to pay attention because somebody said a trigger keyword, whatever the case may be. So those are some things that you would want to look at. Now, do you think that logic would grow without creativity? Quite honestly, I don't think it will. The reason why logic will never grow without creativity is because, well, you won't have anybody to push the envelope. And if you don't have anybody to push the envelope, how will a dull blade stay sharp, right? The only way a dull blade stays sharp is because, well, you have a stone that pushes and rubs against it, making sure that all the discrepancies get removed, similar to, well, in the body, free radicals getting removed, so on and so forth, to prevent diseases and everything else. And you could do so much more with a sharper blade than a dull one, because a lot of people become complacent, and then their words that they tend to use like a sword when they get a little bit out of control can even become a little dull, and therefore by which leads them down the wrong path. And then of course they have self-talk that doesn't even work anymore because they didn't upgrade their system because they were fearing creativity. So let's talk about the ending of this. So with logic, I wanted to become real specific, but I didn't want to put too much trend, but I thought this was pretty interesting because we did talk about, well, being not only specific, but we talked about logic, we talked about engineers, we talked about logistics, etc. Now, if you know, at the end of every lesson, I do this thing where I start to put some pieces together. So the letter L that we're covering today, which is logic, right, is the number 12 numerically on the alphabet. Now we are on the 10th lesson, and that creates the number 22, right? And so for those of you who don't know what 22 means, well, in different areas, in numerology, it means the master builder, right? That's crazy that it means the master builder, but it goes a step further. In science, right? Titanium, the atomic number is 22. There's also 22 chromosomes known as autosomes in the body. There's only 2 after that dictate if you're male or female, but relatively everything else is the same. So there's your 22 if you're picking up on the 222, because, well, without the Gregorian calendar, I'm sure we would be in 2022. But I'll let Rick Ross hand that one out to you. So anyways, moving forward, this is also the symbol of, well, universal love. Now, that's one thing, but here's the best part. If you guys know, I love Shakira, so on and so forth, and she has done a couple World Cup songs. And in soccer, aka football, that's known everywhere else because it's actually played with feet, there's 22 players on the field. 22 is also a signal or a sign or symbol for Earth, as well as a dragon and the tree of life. So those are some things that you want to see or look up for yourself. I'll let you play with AI on that one as far as the meanings of the number 22, but I want to go ahead and go a step further. So if I were to go ahead and now take this a step further, in Roman numerals, the letter L is actually 50. And then, of course, we're on lesson 10, which comes out to the number 6, right? So right now we have 22 and 6. Well, we just went over what 22 means. Let's talk about the number 6. The number 6 represents balance and love, as well as carbon in science, which is a major foundation for life, so on and so forth, etc. The earth apparently was built in 6 days to some religions and beliefs, so on and so forth, etc. It's also a symbol for cosmology and the proof of it and other systems and beliefs and areas of study. In mathematics, it's also seen as a hexagon symbol, and it's used in honeycombs as well as other things like fractals and stuff like that for science, mathematics, etc. But it's a very interesting structure. And then last but not least, because, well, it is number 6 and everything's going on with the world today, you should look up the 6th Amendment, which talks about criminal prosecution, so on and so forth, right after the 5th Amendment, where people have the right to, well, not say a damn thing in order to protect themselves. So there are many ways to communicate. There are many ways to look at both creativity, logic, art, science, and spirituality, even emotion, but without understanding or having, proper dialogue and communication, you'll never understand. And because of that, your mind, your thoughts will remain primitive to what it is that you only know, not what you don't know. So I encourage you, those of you who are extremely logical, that always like to stick by the book and, not try to cross any lines, try to emphasize and try to take a risk every once in a while, a calculated one, using your creativity to venture out and step out of the box just a little bit once again, because, well, things are coming. And I'll tell you what, once we get into art and science, I'm going to start making a whole lot of noise, because art is one thing, science is another, and don't even get me started on the spirituality or the emotional part, because, well, emotions play into both art, science, as well as spirituality, but it comes together in the end. So if you guys enjoyed this lesson, go ahead and smash that like button. Please tell other people about this, as well as other people that are interested in learning how to think better, not just different. Remember, thinking different is great, but thinking better is even, don't even get me started. It's the icing on the cake, because yes, you could think different, but once you think better and it has a positive effect for you and others, well, that's two. You don't need a tattoo or to pay taxes. You can think creatively, make enough logic to keep everybody sane through the artwork that you create by applying science and technology and having a little bit of faith to take the first step so that you can go ahead and have a positive emotion at the end of the day. Anyways, this is Michael Guerrero saying Mike City out. And if you don't know who that is, that was my B-boy name. And in other lessons, I'll go ahead and give you a little bit more snippets about myself. Anyways, till next time, my friends, take care. Have a great day.